What is happening, NBA fans? Welcome in another week of Dropping Dimes. I'm your host, Matt Knost. Please excuse whatever audio abnormalities you may hear. Having a little trouble on my end, so I came up with a solution that it'll be rectified by the next show. But for today, we're using headphones with a mic attached because that is the easiest and quickest solution. So my recording equipment finally went kaput. So got to replace that. It's coming. Anyway, on to today's show. Hopefully the audio isn't so distracting to take you away from all the sweet NBA discussion. We'll get it out of the way. Rest in peace, Paul Pierce. Good for you. That clearly looked like a guy that wanted to join, his fellow retired players and not have to show up to the studio anymore because there is no reason to be posting strippers at your house on Instagram Live unless you really just don't want to go anymore. You're sick of being on the jump. You're sick of getting dragged for your mediocre opinions or your uninformed. I mean, you could tell that he wasn't necessarily putting in the time to research a lot of it. Was just, I played, so I know what I'm talking about, which is true. But, it showed through at times where he's making an opinion and then undercuts his argument like the next sentence later. My favorite was earlier in the season, talking about the Sixers, the fact that that Joel Embiid being out and them struggling was proof of the fact of how valuable he was and how he should be in the MVP discussion. And the game he was talking about, the Sixers won. So, it's Shaq-itis, I like to say, where he's only casually paying attention to what exactly is going on. But whatever the next venture is for you, he put out like a smile and he's moving on to bigger and better things. I'm sure that he is, and given enough time, if he wants another job in television, next season, maybe the season after, he probably could. But I didn't find him so particularly engaging that it's a big loss. I would guess then that, ESPN, TNT, and the like would just move on to whoever the next big retired player is. So Paul Pierce is moving on to other things, and that is not the topic of the conversation. Jeremy Bowers in the chat says Paul went crazy and I love it. And Daniel Savola says Paul Pierce out there living his best life. I wish I had weekends like that. I don't know that it's necessarily every day is kind of the weekend for him on some level. But my favorite was some dancer, stripper, I'm not sure what, hit him up while he was live streaming on Instagram. He's like, come through. we got more than enough room if you want to join us. But have fun out there, Paul. Enjoy your second retirement. And whatever comes next, hopefully it's a fruitful endeavor for you. Moving on. So today's discussion, we're going to lead off with the West heating up. And it's starting to get pretty interesting. So you have the Lakers slipping. They're 4-6 in their last 10. They won last night, but it's against the Raptors, the 11th seeded team in the East. Not a whole lot to crow about. They've got an upcoming East Coast swing. Given where their roster's at, it's going to be difficult for them. Supposedly, according to Mark Stein, Anthony Davis is tentatively set to come back after this swing. So I guess hypothetically, it's either when they're playing Boston at home or it's the game after Boston, but somewhere around April 16th or so is the projected date right now of Anthony Davis's return. And LeBron's is still nebulously defined as the end of April. There's no target date that I've seen. So right now, they needed them to go the rest of the Lakers, and I'm talking about the two stars, needed them to go 500 while they were out, and they have not done that, and they have slipped down in the standings. They're currently sitting at 5th with the Blazers a game and a half back, the Mavs 3 games back, and the Grizzlies 5.5 games back. And you're like, that's a relatively comfortable lead, right? But if in this next 5-game stint, if they go 2-3 or 1-4 in that, you got to start worrying about the teams below you, and especially who I'm going to lead off the discussion with, which is the Dallas Mavs. The Mavs are on fire right now. They are heating up like nobody's business. So I went through, I did a deep dive on the numbers, and this is what I've got. I've got a page and a half of numbers, and I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can because there's nothing more fun than listening to someone recite numbers. All right, so they started the season off slow. Their win percentage was .381 over the first 21 games. They were 8-13. Kristaps missed the first 9, which the Mavs went 5-4 in, and then they went 8-13 in the next they went 3-9 in the next 12 games, of which Kristaps still missed a few of those games as well. So within that run, here's how bad it was. In that opening 8-13 stretch with their win percentage at .381. And by the way, Luka looked out of sorts. He looked kind of out of shape in this early stretch. But here you go. Here are your numbers. They were dead last in 3-point percentage. They were 28th in rebounds. So they're just can't make a shot from outside, can't grab a rebound. They're 28th in assists, 23rd in points, 23rd in blocks, 23rd in effective field goal percentage, 22nd in offensive rating, 22nd in pace, 21st in true shooting, 20th in steals, 19th in defensive rating, and the 19th in net rating. So in that opening 8-13 stretch, they can't defend anyone. And on top of that, their offense, which is what they're supposed to be good at, was just atrocious. Just atrocious. And during that stretch, so, as I just said, they were, say, 30th in 3-point percentage, 28th in rebounds, 28th in assists, 23rd in points, right? All that jazz. During that opening stretch, Luka was 2nd in points. Of all players playing 550 minutes total or averaging 20 minutes a game, he was 2nd in points. So they're 23rd overall, and he's 2nd amongst all players, guards, forwards, centers, doesn't matter, 2nd in all players. He was 1st in field goal attempts, but 44th in field goal percentage. And his 3-point percentage was just bad. He started the season off just terrible. His 70th player in the league under those minutes restrictions that I put forth. Just because I wanted to weed out, all the guys at the end of the bench that are only getting, a handful of minutes a night. And what if they go 1 for 2 over some of those minutes, and then suddenly they're one of the best 3-point shooters in the league? Like, that doesn't count. You're not Joe Harris. But the weird thing is, so they were bad in rebounds, in assists, in blocks, in steals, and all the defensive metrics. As individual players, Luka was 2nd in points. He was 9th in boards. 9th. So they were that piss poor as a team in boards overall, but yet Luka is the 9th best player. He was number 1 overall during that stretch in assists, and yet they are in the bottom third as a team. Basically, he's getting no help. It goes on and on. He was 38th in steals and 22nd in blocks. So his offensive numbers weren't great, but his defensive numbers were solid as hell, especially for, the primary ball handler on the team. And, the other stats don't help him, like his effective field goal percentage and his true shooting. Like effective field goal, because he was shooting so piss poor, he was number 1 in field goal attempts during that stretch. but his effective field goal percentage, because he was shooting so poorly from three, he was 199th in the league. So his offensive woes, even with that being the case, he still got to the line a tremendous amount, and he's still second overall in points, but he's getting no help, right? So Kristaps comes back. And now, and, since then he's missed, I think, 7 games total since that opening 8-13 stretch. But since then, they've gone 20-8, a 7-14 win percentage. And in that stretch, as a team, they're third in 3-point makes, fourth in attempts, which is excellent. They're fourth in effective field goal percentage, fourth in true shooting percentage, fifth in net rating, sixth in offensive rating, seventh in 3-point percentage, 10th in points, 15th in boards, 16th in defensive rating. So getting the additional support of Kristaps, it opens up a lot of the spacing and what they do. And during this stretch, they've been shooting lights out. Luka has rounded into shape and starting to look really good. And what this means for the West is, depending on where you look, like you can go to ESPN, or there's a site called Tankathon. There's a few others where you can look at strength of schedule for the remaining season. And by any estimation, the Mavs have either the easiest schedule to close out, or the second easiest, or the third easiest, but it's somewhere within that mix. ESPN has them as the easiest schedule to close. And for a team like the Lakers, which is struggling, the Mavs, over the next 5-6 game stretch, if AD is going to be out and they go 1-4, 2-4, whatever the case is over that 5 to 6 games, and the Mavs have the easier schedule, they're playing much better basketball right now. What was before a 3-game difference between them and the Lakers is completely evaporated. And suddenly they leapfrog over. So the Lakers need to begin. I'm sure they're already internally worrying, and their fans are worrying, although their fans should take solace in the fact that come playoff time, you still have AD and LeBron. And if they're healthy, that is a tough out for any team. And, they picked up Ben McLemore in the buyout market. Doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot, but they've already had a little bit of discord with Marc Gasol saying, in essence, that he's not exactly happy being demoted to the second unit, because they already have a tremendous amount of second unit guys after they picked up Andre Drummond. Now, Gasol has gone back to the starting lineup in some of these games. And it'll be interesting to see where this ends up in the wash. But with Dallas surging, in conjunction with Dallas, you've got Memphis. And Memphis, in their last 10, has gone 7-3. They're playing above, the preseason expectation as to where they would end up. And at the end of the month, they're set to get Jaren Jackson Jr. back. Now, it should more than likely, because it's been 8 months since he's been off with the meniscus tear. It should take him time to round into shape. He's not up to game speed. It's an injury that normally takes 3 to 6 months to come back, and he's at 8 months, and it's going to be the end of the month as projected. But the GM came out and said end of the month, and then he was interviewed 2 days ago after practice, 2 or 3 days ago, saying end of the month. That's what the doctors are saying, the medical staff, front office. That's how I feel. And my guess is he feels like he could probably play a little bit sooner, but they're going to ease him back. Now, question becomes, does that really help them because they've gotten used to playing without him? I'm just going to go ahead and assume so, that he's not going to come out full bore and slowly reacclimate himself. But that's a problem for, those teams above them, because they're sitting at 25-23 right now. And they're, 4 games out of not having to do the play-in. But if they continue with this surge, they're on a 3-game tear win streak right now, 7-3 overall over their last 10, and they're trending in the right direction. And they, along with the Mavs, can continue this upward escalation. Now, I think San Antonio at 9th, I think they continue to slip a little bit, And Golden State is up and down. You have no idea what you're going to get. As others have pointed out, when Curry is on the floor, they're, top middle offense in the league, somewhere around 13, 14, 15 in that ballpark. And you take them off, and they're the worst offense in the league, hands down. It's not even close. So the on-off numbers without Curry. And that's also because, Draymond's effectiveness is really highlighted when Steph is in there. Because when he's not, Draymond is just not willing to shoot, and it doesn't look like he's got any kind of shot left. And Wiseman is still up and down. Don't know what you're going to get from Oubre on a night-to-night basis. Wiggins is pretty solid. As Steve Kerr said the other day, he eats innings, and that's really key. The guy is rarely, if ever, out of the lineup, and he plays. You can consistently rely on him for X. But Golden State being up and down, you got to worry about New Orleans and even Sacramento behind you. Golden State's a game and a half up on New Orleans, but I wouldn't put them out of the mix, and they're 2 games up on Sacramento. I think the only ones really out of it at this point in the West, technically speaking, are Houston and Minnesota, and quite possibly OKC. But I've seen crazier things from OKC, and what I like about them is they at least know kind of who they are and what they are. Whereas the Rockets, I don't have any clue what in the world that team is. And the T-Wolves, they're so far back right now, even getting D'Angelo Russell back, I'll be intrigued as to what that does to Anthony Edwards' development overall, to see what that trio core is. That being said, I have not watched a Timberwolves game in a long time, and unless they start to get super interesting, I don't intend on watching the T-Wolves game anytime in the near future, potentially through the rest of the season. I am indifferent to that team, just like I am the Magic and the Pistons. I don't really care at this point. But, the Mavs are heating up. And Memphis should be heating up. And who knows if New Orleans begins to light a fire, or Golden State. I think the top pecking order of the West is kind of solidified on some level. I don't see those teams slipping out. Denver's got a relatively easy schedule to close out, and they're playing great. The addition of Gordon to that team, he fits a lot, exactly what they need. And, as he's quoted as saying yesterday or the day before, these are the easiest buckets I've ever gotten in my career. And I believe it, man. The way they pass that ball around, they're a lot of fun to watch, and he's a great addition at a cheaper price too, and somebody that wants to be there. Unlike Jeremy Grant, who wanted out, he wanted to be the primary of a team, and maybe potentially that works for them with Detroit. Between him and Sadiq Bey looks legit, and that's a great rookie pickup for them. But Denver is trending in the right direction. Utah's got one of the easiest, if not, depending on who you look at, they could have the easiest schedule to close out. At one point a few weeks ago, they had the projected easiest schedule to close. But that all changes with if a team that you're going up against in 2 weeks suddenly wins a bunch of games and their win percentage goes up, then it affects your strength of schedule, obviously, then when you play them. They're a tougher team today than they were when that was projected. But the Jazz have a relatively easy schedule. The Suns are playing really good basketball right now. The Clippers are kind of firing on all cylinders. Let's see how it plays out long term with the addition of Rondo. But having a general out on the floor and somebody who can be an architect for what that offense does can only really help. They've gotten more games consistently from their duo, where both have looked good. And right now, Paul George, got him on the brain. Paul George, although Paul George might be throwing a party like that himself. I just don't know if he posted on Instagram Live. Paul George is shooting, if you take Amir Coffey out of the mix, Paul George is shooting the 3rd best percentage from 3 on the team, which is great to see for him and for the Clippers' future. I think it's 432 is what he's shooting right now. Marcus Morris is number 1. Or no, Luke Kennard is number 1. Marcus Morris is 2. And then Paul George, if you take out Amir Coffey, is number 3. But at a fairly high usage. I think it's 7.5 shots a game, and he's shooting that high a clip. But between him and Kawhi, you're getting like 50-ish points from the two of them on efficient shooting night in, night out. That makes them a tough out. So I think those four teams at the very top, I think are all trending in the right direction. They're all playing really excellent basketball right now, which means it's going to be tougher for someone like the Lakers if they continue to slide like this, because in that opening round, right now they'd have to play the Nuggets, which is going to be a tough matchup for them. But if AD and LeBron are healthy, then you kind of got to go with the proven track record there. But they slip down to, say, sixth once playoffs start. That'd be up against the Clippers. Clippers are playing really excellent basketball right now, and you still have to reintegrate over the last 2 weeks of the schedule for the Lakers with the new pieces that they have and whatnot. I mean, if LeBron comes back at the end of the month, say it's into April, he comes back, and we'll just say that they're going to go through the May schedule. That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 games, and then the playoffs start. So 9 games to get LeBron and AD back into kind of game shape in the mix. So you've added a couple guys. Your team has been up and down. Perhaps they're staring at the fact that you guys are, slowly going to come back, and the reintegration of the two of you will right the ship. But that's asking a lot of a team that without them, their confidence has to be shaken a little bit. And I'll be intrigued that if AD comes back without LeBron, is that going to be enough? Because, historically now, especially last season, the on-off when LeBron was on versus off, if AD was just out there, their offense wasn't electric or anything. So would the addition of AD make a difference for them? And would it help stabilize their shakiness? Quite possibly. That's why I'm fearful of the Jaren Jackson coming back that late in the season when Memphis has kind of an identity without him. It's great to get your second best player back at all times, but if he hasn't played in 8 to 9 months at that point, it's going to be a slow reintegration process. And will that throw a monkey wrench into the works and kind of, create a hiccup in the identity of what has gotten you to this point in the season? Or will it just be it's awesome to have him back, and he is going to give us, with each passing game, a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And as we get into the playoffs or potentially the play-in game, it'll be good to have him back. But if it's a slow integration and they go to that play-in game, by rights, he's going to be amped up and want to be an integral part of that game. And you almost want to kind of hold him back a little bit just because you got a tried and true performance from the other guys on your roster. So it'll be intriguing. But Dallas and Denver and Memphis and a few other teams are all trending in the right direction, and the Lakers are kind of spiraling. But it's nice to see from Dallas that they've, reacclimated and gotten back to doing what they do best. Now, defensively, they still have trouble there. And when it comes to actual championship potential, if you can't defend anybody, then the system of outscoring every opponent doesn't really pay dividends in the playoffs. You need to be able to play defense. You need to stop the other team. Getting a bucket is important, but at the same time, if you can't stop the other team in the slightest, and you're one of the worst teams out there, then you've got no real shot at winning a championship. Now, perhaps they flip a switch when it comes to playoff time and the urgency of it, whatnot, and they start playing better defense. Potentially, but the track record of what we've seen this season doesn't really pretend for that for the future. If you read the tea leaves, it looks like they'll be able to score a bunch of buckets and not be able to stop much. So it's not like they're a real championship threat, but I think the top 4 teams in the West right now genuinely are. I mean, if Utah continues to shoot like this, and Bogdanovich has kind of gotten out of his slump a little bit, but right now, by effective field goal percentage, I think Joe Ingles is the best player in the league. So you kind of want him shooting as much as humanly possible. And it's when you look at their roster and the overall stats within the league, it's like they've got a bunch of guys right now who are playing at the height of their potential between him and Conley and Donovan Mitchell. And then you still have the interior presence of Gobert and once, Jordan Clarkson in that 6-man role. Bogdanovich, if he can get out of that slump overall, if this new trend is what we all assume he is, Utah's future looks pretty damn bright. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, we're only a little over a month away from the start of the playoffs, and it looks like we got some devastatingly interesting matchups early on. I mean, the play-in games as they stand right now, it's going to be Dallas versus Golden State and then Memphis versus the Spurs. And the Spurs and Golden State both need to win 2 games. That's the way the play-in game works. The 9-10's got to win 2 games. The 7-8 just need to win 1. But then after that, say you just take the higher seed in that, it's Utah versus Memphis. That's a lot of fun. I'm tuning into that. And then Phoenix versus Dallas. That's a boatload of fun. Then we got Clippers versus Blazers. I'm very intrigued by that. And then Nuggets, Lakers. I mean, those are 4 excellent series that I'm excited about right now if everything holds true. Now, the East, the flip side of that, not so much. Not so much. The 9-10 spot, you got the Pacers and Bulls. Neither team you should fear in a 7-game. In a one-off night, yeah, both teams have the potential to win a game against anybody by and large in the East. But a 7-game series, they're just going to be outmatched by and large. And then after that, like if the top holds, it's Sixers versus the Celtics. Fun series, but the Celtics, like their energy is up and down. No clue what you get from them night in, night out. And the lack of urgency is disheartening for the amount of talent that they have. And it looks like as of right now, Brad Stevens' job is safe. Danny Ainge has come out and basically said as much. They're not going to make a change at the head coaching position because if they fire Brad, I think 20 other teams would snap him up immediately. There's very few teams that, if he was out on the open market, wouldn't swap him out for what they have. Then you got Brooklyn versus New York. That's an awesome matchup. I really hope that holds. A Subway series, but no chance in hell the Knicks can hold up against the Nets. Just no chance. Especially with Durant is coming back tonight. And if you look at their numbers, basically so long as they've got Harden and everybody else, they're still difficult to deal with. Now, if Harden's out and it's Kyrie in his place, it's a team that is easily beatable. But you get Harden and Durant, and Kyrie, I think at this point realizes he's third fiddle. They're going to be a monster for anybody. Bucks Heat, that's a lot of fun. And, last year, for an opening round, I would have favored the Bucks, but if we're going later, start favoring, being like, man, this Heat team playing really well, has a sense of identity. The Bucks kind of shrink in the playoffs, and this year, I actually think the Bucks are a little bit different. I like the fact that they're not number 1 overall in the East. Their point differential net rating puts them as the best team in the East, but the addition of Drew Holiday, just have somebody else shoulder the load when you need a bucket late, because it was too easy to scheme for them. and the fact that Budenholzer has been more fluid with lineups and kind of seeing a little bit more with what he's got. And then after that, you'd have the Hawks versus Hornets, and LaMelo could be back at that point. That's so weird that that's the 4-5. I didn't think the Hornets would make it into the playoffs on the preseason projection, and the Hawks I figured would sneak in and be sitting at the fourth at 27-24 right now. It's pretty impressive. But let's go over to the comments on the side and see what everybody is saying. Daniel Savo says Lakers end up in the bottom 8 and they're going to have problems. Yeah, I think if they slipped all the way to 9-10, they've got a real problem just because they've got to win 2. And if they have one bad night of those 2 games, they're out. And the NBA does not want that because they want the Lakers in there. They want LeBron in there. He equals ratings. Personally, I'm sick of LeBron, but it's not me being a LeBron hater. Now I understand all the people that rooted against my Bulls in the 90s, which to me, I was a younger kid. It was unfathomable. It's like, this is the best. He's the best player. But now it's like, just something different, please, a different storyline. I would love to have that. But he equals ratings, so the NBA wants it to happen. Jeremy Bauer says Luka heating up, show it out, damn straight. Muzaffar Han. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that right. Muzaffer. I have never seen that name. What an interesting name. Anyway, Mavs took a big hit from COVID. They lost 5 key rotation players and no games postponed. They did. And now they've got Porzingis out with a wrist thing, Kleber with like a calf strain. They've got some guys out, but given that their schedule is easier, and I think that their confidence as a team has grown overall, I think that they can weather this current injury storm. But the COVID hit, that didn't do them any favor. JJ Davi says, will Suggs be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft after his performance in the tournament? I don't know. I don't follow college, so I leave that up to the people that know that best. Otherwise, it's just speculation by my part, and I'm just regurgitating other people's opinions, having not watched the games, and I feel that that's kind of inauthentic. Like coming into the draft last year, I only liked 3 players by reading scouting reports, seeing clips, watching highlight reels of them in college, and of those 3 players were, I liked Wiseman at the top. LaMelo I didn't know, and when you looked at his numbers, it's like he gave 2 shits about defense in New Zealand, and that's not going to translate well. And he was the worst player in the New Zealand league in pick and roll defense. And you're like, you know what the NBA loves to do is run pick and roll. So that's what not watching the games gets you. Doing an assessment just based solely on the numbers, and the numbers indicated, the guy can pass, but I question all these other things, and I was wrong. So anyway, it was Wiseman. I just liked a lot of his raw athletic ability. Obi Toppin as an Amari 2.0. I wasn't saying he was going to be, an instant all-star or anything like that, but it was like that dude knows exactly what he does, and that should translate really well in the NBA. And then Pokuševski, because I literally watched 1 game highlight reel, and then I was like, who is this guy? And then I started watching nonstop. And what you would watch is he'd come down the floor and do a play that was amazing for a dude his size, amazing, and then come down the next time down and do a play that was wildly stupid. Listen, if you could just tamp down on the errant passes and the being prone to turnovers, he has a feel for the game that is impossible to teach. And at his size, with that kind of shooting stroke, this dude is legit. And so far, he's given those highlights in the NBA. He's made some passes that have been just stellar and doing step backs. He had a little 1-footed baseline floater a couple nights ago that was gorgeous. But there's still growing pains he needs to grow into. He also needs to put on a little meat on those bones to weather the storm of a full NBA season. But I'm glad that the few hours that I spent looking at clips of him, as many as I can find, are starting to pay off. I wasn't wrong on that one. Obi Toppin, I think, is still, he is what he is. And I don't know that he'll be anything other than Amari 2.0. But Wiseman, I figured would be a little bit more consistent at this point. I still think it's too early to tell. He's such a young kid. But I know some people are pushing back saying you can't keep making excuses for him when he's the second overall. I just think that his college career was, 2 games? So basically, he's straight out of high school. And at the center position, that takes time to adjust in the NBA level. He overcommits on defense sometimes, like jumps too early for a block. And his only choice at that point is to foul or get out of the way. Just does things where he's 19 and he's unaccustomed to not being the best player on the court. So give him a little time. He'll round into shape. But to your question, I don't know. I don't know, JJ. So Jeremy Bauer says, had the Lakers kept most of last year's team, they would have easily repeated. Too many new pieces and players like Gasol don't understand their roles. I don't know, though, man. When they made those additions in the offseason, I thought they got deadlier. I just think when you lose LeBron for the longest stint of his career, I'd have to go look, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate off the top of my head. And AD gets hurt. That's just what he does. A guy his size, the human body was not meant to be that big and play a sport. So to lose him is understandable. And actually getting him that rest is probably a good thing. Hopefully it is just a calf strain and not an Achilles thing, because you don't want to see any long-term damage for him. But personally, like on the outside looking in, the preseason, I was like, they got stronger. And I like this team to repeat quite a bit. It's just when you lose the identity of your team for this long, it's tough to weather that storm. And then you do the buyout market additions, and then that throws another spanner in the works. So I don't know. They're not dead yet. Johnny Shoemaker says, do you think the Bulls are better running the offense through Zach or through Vooch? Just joining live, so not sure where the conversation is. LOL. Well, we haven't really talked about the Bulls. I think it's right now, it's figuring out the dynamic of the team. I mean, last night the offense clearly went through Vooch. They got a nice W, a commanding one. But, it took 29 shots, if I'm remembering the stat line off the top of my head, to Levine's 14 or so. And what I do like from this is Markkanen, coming off the bench and not getting any real starter minutes. And it seems to not have crushed his spirits. He's still playing really strong in those minutes. I think the offense is more dynamic if it's run through Levine. It's more consistent if it's run through Vooch, just because it's repeated pattern of the same type of move over and over again. He's a good passer if you could turn him into a Jokic, but the problem is Vooch is 30 at this point, so he kind of is what he is. But if his passing was a little bit better, then I have zero problem running the offense through him. But I would hope it's kind of a back and forth between the two, and we exploit the best matchup that we have that night. So if you're going up against somebody that has no real interior presence, then let's feed the ball into Vooch and just punish that team. Whereas if you're going up against the Sixers, all right, well, although in that instance they got Simmons, and Simmons you can put on Levine, so you need somebody like White or Markkanen or whoever it is, Satoransky, Thad, to step up in their place. Philly's probably not the best, but let's say the Nets, okay, feed it in down low and make LaMarcus try and stop Vooch or DeAndre, or if they're going to play small ball lineup at the end of the game with KD at the 5. Although I don't think that they'll do that now if you've got LaMarcus in there. But we'll see long term with KD coming back tonight. I'll be intrigued as to what the lineup is and where the minutes go. But as per your question, I don't know. I think it's still too early to tell. Yeah, Shoemaker says what basically I was laughing about internally. Paul George would throw the same party as Paul Pierce and marry the girl, which is what he did. If you don't know, he knocked up a an exotic dancer and he married her. Um, and I'm not judging that. So be it, man. You found love. Um, so hopefully you're happy and the kids are all healthy. But yeah, I don't. I wonder what would happen in his household if he had a party like that. Does she get upset? Maybe, knowing that he fell in love with a stripper previously. Or maybe she's secure in that. No idea. And I'm not going to sit here and speculate. But yeah, might just. Um, Jake Cleveland asks, out of nowhere, curveball. I wonder if Derrick Rose will get in the Hall of Fame. As of right now, I don't think so. To his credit, he's got an MVP, and it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, not the NBA Hall of Fame. So making a national championship game coupled with the MVP in the Bulls run, and then the second half of his career, like at this point, I think the only thing securing him getting in would be longevity. So if he ends up playing, into his late 30s and is a consistent individual, but unfortunately, I think Derrick Rose will be the first ever MVP that doesn't make the Hall of Fame. Sucks. After, the record of being the youngest to ever win it and the future looking so bright. And you know what sucks about that? The night before he got his injury, I was talking to a friend, and I won't name drop, but you know who it is. It's a comedian, and he was like, "Dude, I was just sitting courtside," and he was like, when he pulls up for a jump shot or layup, it is so violent to watch as he just jackknifes straight into the air because you could really see it sitting that close. The amount of force, he was like, it's really impressive, but I fear for the long-term health of his knees. And the next night or the next game, he blew out his knee. And I saw him and I was like, you son of a bitch. What did you do? He's a Knicks fan. And it's kind of like I knew he didn't mean it because his team at that point had been bad for so long. It's not like he was wishing ill on my squad. But we were both lamenting because we're both huge fans of the guy. He was a revelation to watch. At the time when the Bulls drafted him, I wanted Michael Beasley because I was like, dude, we got Kirk Heinrich, we got Chris Duhon, we've got point guards for days. And the only game I had seen of his was the national championship game. It's like, dude can't even make a free throw. Like, is he athletically explosive? Sure, but what is he going to do in the NBA? And that's one of those where if you don't watch enough college, you just don't know. And then, by all accounts, like his workout was so wildly impressive, it was a no-brainer. And then I was like, all right, I guess we're taking this guy. I was still looking at Beasley going, he seems like the choice to me. And then you watch him in the pros and be like, nah, I was dead wrong. You get some right, you get some wrong. Kevin Durant over Greg Oden, I thought was a no-brainer. Just like, dude, 7-footer that can shoot from everywhere. And Greg Oden has one leg shorter than the other. That's in the discussion. Got that one right, but my own team, Derrick Rose, I wanted Beasley. So, no idea. But to your question, I do not think Derrick Rose will end up in the Hall of Fame, and that hurts. It sucks, man. I was 5 minutes from meeting him one night, and it still upsets me to this day. Literally walked in to the Comedy Store because I had a spot. And another friend of mine who works there, he's a bartender, and he's like, dude, you just missed Derrick Rose. He just walked out the front door. And I was like, oh. And he's a Chicago native, and he's a Bulls fan. And the look on his face is like, I got a picture with him if you want to see the picture. And I was like, I don't want to see your fucking picture, man. Just upset. Not upset at him, upset of literally missed him by 5 minutes. Because I would like to shake his hand and be like, dude, you are so much fun to watch. Thank you for being a Bull type of thing. Just the platitudes of what do you say to a guy that you've never met, they're never going to meet again, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, let's see. So is it pronounced Muzaffar? He said it's a Turkish name. And greetings from Turkey, Izmir, Turkey. You know what sucks because of COVID, my friend? I was supposed to go to Istanbul last year, flirting with potentially going in the fall at this point. My wife and I are debating between going to South America or going to Turkey and Egypt. Not really sure yet. But if you guys are thinking about traveling, it is cheap as shit to travel anywhere if you lock it in right now. And we're thinking about doing it. I can get to Istanbul cheaper than I can get to 5 South American countries right now. So Istanbul might be might be number 1 on the leaderboard right now. But thank you for joining us from Turkey. Says he loves dropping dimes in the top 10. Appreciate you tuning in, man. This party's over. Asked if I play fantasy basketball. I do not. I think the season is just too long for me. Even though I follow night in, night out, I spend enough time absorbed in all the machinations of what teams are up and down, what players are doing well. I realized that would translate well into fantasy, but to have another thing to obsess about on top of this just doesn't seem healthy. That's why I like the NFL. It's once a week. Well, now with Thursday game, which sucks, and then Sunday and Monday, and they're talking about with the new streaming services, Saturday, adding in a consistent Saturday game. I'm not exactly excited about that because Thursday game is so terrible. I don't want a Saturday game. I wish it would just be a Sunday, Monday, personally. Jeremy Bauer says Lakers are missing Rondo. I kind of agree with that, but we'll see how it plays out in the playoffs. And then Joey Anthology said it's really cool to be excited about the Bulls basketball again. I agree. We're not a great team, but we're at least interesting. And that's something to be said. My hat is wonky. So the last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is something that to put a seed in your minds out there as basketball fans. So the current TV deal runs up after the 24-25 season, and the deal is for $24 billion overall. And it averages out to be $2.4 to $2.6 billion per year, right? But after the NFL's $100 billion deal, the new projections after that are for 3 times this. The projected next deal starting in the 25-26 season is $75 billion. Threefold over what they make now. Threefold. Now, will they learn from the mistake of the past of instead of doing the smoothing technique, they just straight injected all this extra money in. So then guys started getting wildly paid outside of their overall value to the league itself, just because teams were flush with cap money and they had the foolish, idea of we're all, this money's the projected cap is always going to rise, and we're always going to have all this extra cash, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as opposed to that $20 million, $25 million, jump one season. So your Tyler Johnsons and whatnot got wildly overpaid because their contract ended at precisely the right time. So this next one is going to triple the amount. So somebody like James Harden this year, instead of making his $30 million, will be making $120 million. And by the end of his contract with the Nets, if the future pay was at current, if you just multiply by 3, by the end of his contract with the Nets, they'd be paying him $140 million a year. So, which is an obscene amount. I'm not saying he's not worth that. Like somebody like LeBron, I think when people push for just doing away with the max salary and saying a guy should be able to get what he is worth to that team on the open market, and then they have to make the calculus of there's still a salary cap, but if you want to spend 70% of your salary cap to pay a player like LeBron, perhaps that's worth it to you. And if you look at the financial impact he had on, say, Cleveland, it's really dramatic of when he was there and he goes to the Heat, and then when he comes back, the boon to the downtown economy, it was worth billions of dollars to the surrounding businesses, let alone to the Cavs themselves. So somebody like LeBron, I think, is worth that 140 or whatever he's potentially projected to make. But then the flip side of that is the rookie contract scale. Anthony Edwards, the number one overall pick, would be making $29.2 million straight out of college. And in the late 90s, the reason that there is a rookie scale now is guys were signing obscene contracts before they'd ever played a minute because there was no restriction on that. So if you projected the value of him saying this guy's going to be a cornerstone of our franchise, they were getting $100 million contracts before they really put up anything in the league to justify getting that. So they wanted to take that away so teams weren't completely hamstrung by that, but also incentivize those rookies to play for a huge deal. And not to say that if Anthony Edwards, if he were to be signing number one overall in the 25-26, the 29.2 would completely demotivate him. But at the end of that rookie scale deal, he'd be making 52.7. Unless, you're dangling the carrot of, do you want to jump that up from 52 point whatever to 150? Perhaps that is motivation enough. But once you get past a certain point, the numbers kind of become meaningless on some level. You're already set for life, and you already have generational wealth. So I saw the Reddit. I saw the article posted on Reddit over at the RNBA, which is, if you don't use, I thoroughly recommend RNBA. I also like Basketball Reference and Hoops Hype, Cleaning the Glass, and then there's 50 others as well. But those are the ones I consistently go to the most. And NBA.com, their stats functionality is pretty good. I never read the articles on NBA.com. I literally just go there for standings and for stats. That's all I use it for. But I still use it. Anyway, so posted on there, and there was an interesting comment when you started going through it. What if you took that surplus and basically just created an investment fund? So then, after the duration of that TV contract, as you've accrued this wealth, so if it does triple, right? If you just maintained salaries, now this is me adding to what the individual said. But his idea was if you took it, created an investment fund, and then paid out fans dividends from that, and I think there was a supplemental comment to that saying then they could reinvest and create their own streaming platform and be a kind of a destination for fans to go to and pay their subscriptions and then just cut out the streaming service middleman. I'd be intrigued as to whether or not that would generate more wealth. But what I do think would be interesting is they took that extra, right? That 2/3, that we'll just call it $50 billion overall over the lifespan of that 10-year-ish contract, created an investment fund. Then those guys that in essence paid in, now you're getting a 7-figure dividend every year for the rest of your life, more than likely. So you have a guaranteed income once you retire of 7 figures. Then they could also increase the retirement bonuses to or the pensions to previous players and really pay them the due that they're owed, just because they helped create this league overall. They could beef up the healthcare services that they provide, um, create more of an infrastructure overall. They could also, if they have this investment wing of it, then they can go out and create other businesses on top of their business. They could buy all the manufacturing for their apparel and merchandising and streamline that. If they have that streaming service, they've got that. They could cut out the middleman of the ticketing services. They could potentially become their own sports book because they would be able to back the bets being put up. Like the 50 billion injection creates so many more financial opportunities. And if the players are willing to basically look at that as an investment as opposed to money now, because you'd still be splitting up $25 billion and salaries would maintain. And then you could do the dividend payout as a percentage of, like, so if you're a max player, you'd be giving up X and you would accrue those. It's like, your shares, so that when there's a payout, you get a percentage of what you invested back into this overall company. And the financial structure that you create would be massive, just utterly massive. Then you could weather any kind of storm, whether there's a viewership maybe up or down, live attendance, like on a year like COVID, if there's another outbreak like this, you have all these other revenue streams coming in, and it just makes it a more bulletproof business idea. And that comment alone sent me down just a mental wormhole of like, wow, think of the financial ramifications of what you could do with that and how many lives you could affect. Because there's now not going to be any more stories of player played X number of years in the league, and then within 2 years of leaving, they're completely broke and destitute. And Jeremy Bowers brings up a point that a lot of people have. Players make too much money, in his opinion. But it comes down to free market economics. We're willing to pay for that, whether it's through viewership or attendance or merchandise. We're putting our dollars and eyes and time and attention, and that is worth X. So I don't blame the players, because they're the ones that are generating the interest, the intrigue, and the money. They're just getting what the market is offering. But I know what you mean. It is crazy numbers. And I think it'll be, from a PR standpoint, more palatable to the public at large if players aren't making. I don't think people would bat so much of an eye at somebody of LeBron or Kawhi or Giannis or Luka or Jokic or any of those guys making that upper tier, crazy, over $100 million figure. It's when, the individuals that are coming off the bench are making $25-35 million a year, that there will be a public outcry and people won't be able to understand. It's just like, you know what? That's what the minimum is. That's what a 2 to 4 year contract for someone of this caliber. It's what the general market within the NBA dictates. I agree, but I do think it's interesting to think about what this could mean. But more than likely, they're just going to do a status quo. The players that are playing now are going to take the percentage of the pie that they feel that they've earned. I just think that, Jeremy adds that he doesn't think a player is worth 140, let alone the 50 or the 35. I think some players are worth that just because of what they actually mean to a team. I mean, think of it like this. By basketball standards, Kobe did not deserve that last contract he got from the Lakers, just by what he was giving on the court and the actual his value in terms of wins and losses, but he was worth that high number to the eyes that he would bring in, to the fan base that loved him, to the amount of money and attendance that he could generate for the Lakers and also for the LA Live complex down there. When there's a hot Lakers game, all those bars are full. Those restaurants are full. The shops down there are generating more. It's better for the local economy when you have someone like that. And so, you can go and look up what LeBron meant to the economy of downtown Cleveland once he came back. You can track the financial trajectory of the local economy. So I think the guys on that caliber are worth it. And even to the spirit of a team and a city like Cleveland with LeBron, what he meant to them and gave them a sense of identity within not only the nation, but the world. This guy puts them on the map. I don't know that any person is worth $140 million, regardless of a sport or occupation. But if that's what the market dictates, we live in a capitalist, society. I'm not going to blame the players for getting that. It's a multimillionaire is less offensive to me than a multi-billionaire. That's just my own 2 cents. That's not what this show is about, and I don't want to get into the economics of the inequities within the system that we have here in this country and the world at large. But for the most part, but if that's what the system dictates, then I'm just going to talk about the ins and outs of what that system is. And Jeremy counters with those are once in a generation type talent. You're right in regards to Kobe and LeBron and whatnot, but doesn't mean that they're not worth it. And especially given the dynamics of the open market system. If you took off the limitations of max player salaries, I'd be really interested to see who was actually worth the money in this league. Because there'd be far fewer players making, the Nets wouldn't have the 3 guys that they have. They wouldn't be able to afford it. And there'd be a lot more parity on some level. If you took away the max salary and then also made the repeater tax even more stringent, because certain teams just don't give a shit. So if you made it tremendously detrimental, then you'd be dispersing the superstar talent over all the teams because guys want to get paid. And it more than likely, in my opinion, would make the system more equitable as far as parity overall. That's just a guess. I need to really think about it, but off the top of my head, that's just my quick skim opinion. But on a final note on this bump is, so with the current deal ending in 24-25, that's also when qualifying offers for this year's rookie class can be signed. How many of these guys will do what no rookie does, which is turn down their massive extension? I would assume any of them that are up for that a team is willing to do, they're going to say no, because unless the NBA is going to allow that team to base it on the projected, income coming in of the TV deal, unless that deal is inked, I don't know how you could do that. So there should be rookies, high-end caliber rookies, for the first time ever, turning down their max extensions. And will they hit the free market? That will be super interesting. You're Anthony Edwards, you're LaMelo Balls, by that time, let's see how Sadiq Bey and Tyrese Halliburton, or if Wiseman is rounded into shape, and everybody else down the line. There's a lot of interesting rookies this year, and what their overall value, or if somebody that right now is just playing okay surges, like Pokashevsky, or Obi Toppin, or Patrick Williams, or there's a lot of players out there, but something to think about. All right. Anyway, that is Dropping Dimes for today. Thank you to everybody. Nazir Muhammad, I just saw your comment. I'm sorry, I'm closing up. He asked when I think George Hill will suit up for the Sixers. We'll get to that. I'm going to do more of an East, I believe, next week, and talk about the East next week. But thank you to everybody that joined me in the chat. It's cool to check in with everybody and somebody from Turkey all the way, around the world. Love and hoops. It brings us together. So that is it for Dropping Dimes. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, it's at Matt Knost, MATTKNOST. And that's it. There you go. There's your Dropping Dimes for today. Stay safe out there. Stay 6 feet apart. Enjoy your week of NBA action. And I'll see you guys next week for another edition of Dropping Dimes. Until then, adios.